Thank you, Klaus, for your kind introduction, and also to you and members of the Planning Committee for accepting my proposal that I speak not only about the Hearing Voices movement, but also about the shared perspectives between the HVN and ISPS. And that is a particular perspective that I hold because my traumas are less commonly understood to be traumas, being intergenerational maternal distress during gestation. And I'll be speaking more to that momentarily. I'd also like to thank Julie Kipp, president of ISPS International and one of the founding members of ISPS US, for reaching out to me in April of 2023 to ask if I might have an interest in speaking at this conference. I happily said yes and submitted my proposal to the Planning Committee. So who am I? Oops. I'm no one without my notes. Just a moment. Okay. And being able to read them. I began hearing voices external to myself when I was 31 years old in April 1983 and was hospitalized twice between Halloween night and early February of 1984. My active voice hearing experiences followed a lifetime of frequent and sometimes extraordinary sensitivity and vulnerability to some of the people I've encountered and spaces I've occupied. I've always been described as being too sensitive, and in 2017 was told that I'm an empath. I hold trauma-based understandings of the array of factors that led to my vulnerability to hearing voices, and familial, cultural, and spiritual understandings of the factors that fostered my resilience, helping to guide me through my most difficult voice hearing experiences and achieve a virtually full, unmedicated recovery. I've been medicated for less than 2 of the past 40 years. I believe the sensitivity and accompanying vulnerabilities within my own physiological makeup, a sensitivity not shared by my 2 older sisters, is born of the particular combination of traumas I experienced beginning in my mother's womb. I was not abused as a child. My own primary traumas were familial and historical, born of war, colonization, refugee flight within and from China, maternal distress during gestation, immigration before age 4, undiagnosed, untreated maternal depression, racism, and a retreat into silence at age 14 when a conflict arose between my parents, especially my mother, and my middle sister. But I should start from the beginning. So, family and heritage. I am Chinese. These are the top right is the Bian family. The bottom left is my mother stand with her sister, and I think their high school class, I'm not certain. And to the left, there's a bit about my grandfather who was a student at Brown University, and a picture you'll see again of my mother with the governor of Hong Kong, and more about that in a moment. So I was born in Hong Kong in 1951 to a refugee family that had fled Shanghai in 1949, just weeks before Mao's troops marched into the city. My eldest sister, Elaine, then 10, said she remembers seeing people being taken away to be shot. In 1951, with me in utero, my mother returned to China to tell her parents and siblings that she and my father had placed the family names on the immigration list to the United States. At the end of the visit, Mother said her goodbyes to her family and returned to Hong Kong, wondering, as she set her sights toward the West and an uncertain future, whether she would ever see her family again. She would not know for the next 27 years whether anyone in her family survived communism or the Cultural Revolution. How do I advance? So this is a photographer in Bloomington, Indiana, took the middle photograph because he thought I was so cute. I was cross-eyed, funny-looking cross-eyed kid. The picture to the left is the family passport picture. My immigration, my green card, my naturalization certificate, and a couple of pictures of me with my mother and middle sister on board the USS President Cleveland. And this, well, the family waited in Hong Kong for 4 more years. We were finally able to come to the US thanks to the Aid Refugee Chinese Intellectuals Program, established in 1952 by the Truman administration to prevent brain drain from communist China to the Soviet Union. Under the auspices of the ARCI, any American-trained Chinese who could find a sponsor was allowed to come to the US. Father qualified because he'd received a PhD in physical chemistry from Brown University in 1932. In the summer of 1955, one of Father's best friends at Brown, Uncle Jerry Schmidt, was able to offer him a postdoctoral fellowship at Indiana University. Mother got a job working at the Indiana University Library, and my 2 sisters went to high school and elementary school. I went to nursery school. During those first weeks of nursery school, when my mother dropped me off, I would fall to the floor and wrap my arms around her knees, crying and begging her not to leave. I had recently lost my Amma, the Hong Kong nursemaid who took care of me while my mother, who was a professional librarian, went to work. And I had said goodbye to my Amma somewhere in Hong Kong, and she left, and I never saw her again. I was afraid I was going to lose my mother as well. I adjusted after a few weeks and have no more memories of tearful goodbyes, but it was a difficult year. I fell often, hitting my head on the ground, hitting my forehead so hard that I have permanent goosebumps. And for some reason, I never put my arms out to break the fall. And I wondered whether I was somehow punishing myself, knocking some sense into myself in order to punish myself for having lost my mom, Amma. I was also struggling to make sense of our new homeland, learning English, learning how to relate to a lot of people, children and adults who didn't look anything like me or my family, learning how to become an American. When the family left Hong Kong, Mother gave up not only a birth family and homeland, but also a significant career as a librarian. During the Hong Kong years, she had founded the Mencius Library, the first public library in Hong Kong with an all-Chinese collection. She never again found such professional satisfaction in the United States. That's Mother with the governor of Hong Kong. Mother dealt with those losses with a stoic silence, never speaking of the family and homeland she had left behind, and she never spoke of her aborted professional dreams. She did not want to put the burden of her grief and loss on us children. But if Mother was silent, Father happily was not. He was loquacious and circumspect, kind and possessed of a generous spirit and strong sense of justice and fair play, and he tried to instill those qualities in us children. Father was far luckier than Mother, ever resourceful and well-connected in the US thanks to the relationships he had built during his graduate studies at Brown and maintained across decades, oceans, and continents. He found an array of jobs in the US, and he knew the whereabouts of his entire family. His parents and siblings had all emigrated, mostly to the US. Many first and second generation Asian children in the US. Is there an incredible echo? Okay, good. Many first and second generation Asian children in the US find a balance between 2 cultures, Eastern and Western, struggle to find a balance between 2 cultures, Eastern and Western. My sisters and I had far fewer such struggles. We were instructed to speak only English in the home. So rather than reading Chinese literature and practicing calligraphy, I grew up reading European fairy tales and fables, Greek, Roman, and Norse mythology, and such Western children's classics as Heidi, Pinocchio, Bambi, and Little Women. When questioned about this, my father always responded, "When in Rome, do as the Romans do." And so we accepted. It was easier, after all, not to be forced to navigate the space between two very different cultures. I grew up believing my parents took this approach because they didn't want us to learn to speak accented English. They thought, correctly, I think, that if our English were very good, we would be better accepted in the West. After a year in Bloomington, Father was offered an associate professorship at Youngstown University in Ohio. I was something of an outcast in the inner city school I attended because I was foreign, wore glasses, and was extremely cross-eyed. But corrective eye surgery and our move in the summer after third grade to Oak Ridge, Tennessee, where Father had gotten a research position at the Oak Ridge National Laboratories, changed my life dramatically. I suddenly had a large circle of friends in my neighborhood, at school, and in Girl Scouts and church. I grew to be a mostly happy child. I belonged. But when I was 13, my middle sister began seeing a young man of whom my parents disapproved, and who is now her husband of more than 54 years. The family fights caused me to shut down because, in an effort not to think or feel too much about the family conflict, I hid my true thoughts and feelings and ceased to form or articulate opinions about almost everything. Adolescence is a time when we should be exploring the world and the ways in which we relate within and to it. By shutting myself down, I aborted that process and remained too timid, too filled with self-doubt, and too frequently depressed until I started hearing voices at age 31. And for me, at least equally importantly, I became a mother at age 34. I went to college at Furman University in Greenville, South Carolina, where my father was then teaching, having faced mandatory retirement in those years, age 65, from government service at Oak Ridge. In the fall of my senior year, I started having insomnia and also got blinding headaches. I began to sense a dark, brooding presence at once proximate to me and within my mind. I don't think it ever took the form of an external voice, but a couple of times in private, I flew into rages about some grievance or other. One night when I was alone in my suite, I broke my study board over the footpost of my bed, saying as I slammed it over the post, "You won't talk to me." I had no clue who I was talking to and have no recollection of being that angry with anyone. The words and strength of feeling seemed to come from nowhere. After I graduated from Furman, I decided to move to Boston to seek my independence. Unfortunately, after arriving in Boston, and despite my wishing to find an interesting education-appropriate job, I accepted a secretarial position almost immediately at Harvard Medical School's Department of Psychiatry, then at Boston City Hospital, located in the heart of Roxbury, one of Boston's most impoverished neighborhoods, and I became desperately unhappy. I saw so much poverty and degradation that I decided I needed to do something to save the world. Hold that thought. That fall, just before my 21st birthday, I started seeing a third-year psychiatric resident at Harvard who was trained in psychoanalysis. Dr. M's warm and gentle guidance helped me begin to consider who I was and who I wished to be as both an independent and an interdependent soul, whose ability to live reasonably happily in the world was greatly influenced by my relationships with family, friends, and the changing environments in which I found myself. Having the opportunity to explore more deeply the ways in which I experienced the world and all the people in it was hugely helpful. One doesn't engage in such deep work without it becoming an integral part of oneself. But learning to express myself and my needs was not a natural path for a young Chinese woman who had learned through my mother's well-intentioned example to favor silent stoicism over expressing emotions. I walked out of therapy the day Dr. M asked me about my relationship with my mother. It took 3 weeks for me to forgive her for forcing me to betray my mother and my family. When I finally went back, we began to work, and I embarked on a course of self-rediscovery that allowed me over time to find the desire and